Welcome back to our new video in our masterclass in project management. First or the second video about decision-making methods. And here we're going to talk about the break-even and make or buy analysis. What is the method about? What are the data that we need? First of all, I want to describe the principles of break-even or make or buy decisions. We look at the process or production costs as a part of the break-even model. We determine the sales revenues. We also look at break-even and profit and loss. We consider the make or buy analysis, where we will also look at the different parameters. But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So let's now have a look at the principles of the break-even or make or buy methods. In the break-even problem, we compare the total cost of the production of a product or a service or a solution with the revenues generated when the products or services are sold, and we evaluate if we can make a profit or not. Make or buy is a little bit different. Here we evaluate if we should make or buy a product ourselves. And basically this is about the quantities that we want to produce, and we have to compare the cost of different alternatives. So we may have different alternatives to produce a product or a service, and we are going to compare those two. In the simplest model, we only have two decisions to make, two costs to compare, which are the cost to make the product or the cost to buy the product. So these are different elements that we will consider in the following slides. When we look at the make or buy or the break-even point method, we have to evaluate the process or production cost. We want to understand, or we need to understand, what are the costs related to the production or the use of a product or a service. In all cases, we will evaluate two different types of costs. We have always the fixed cost and the variable cost. Fixed costs are incurred whatever the situation. So when you have a production facility, even when you're not producing, you still have the fixed cost. For a school, we still have the staff, we still have the classrooms, we still have the equipment. All these things are fixed costs. Do we teach or we don't teach? It's still there. We have to consider them, but it's a fixed value over all the spectrum of production. The second element are the variable costs, and the variable costs, they vary proportionally to the amount of products or services that we are creating. The total cost is the sum of all the costs. So basically, when we look at the formulas, we have the total cost is equal to the fixed cost plus the variable cost. The fixed costs are typically a fixed value. They're the same, whatever the amount of elements we are producing. The variable cost can be expressed as a unit production cost, V, or sometimes S, it depends what I use, and N is the number of units that we are producing. So the variable costs depend on the unit production cost, and of course the number of units that have been produced or will be produced. The second element to determine are the revenues. The revenues are defined per unit item sold. So every time when we sell an item, we get a certain amount S. The total revenue depends on the total number of items that have been sold, and in case there are no sales, the revenue of course is zero. So the revenue curve is a straight line passing through the origin. The formulas are very simple. The revenue is equal to the unit revenue multiplied with the units sold, so S times N. We can draw for a simple case the break-even analysis in a graph. So we have On the x-axis, we have the number of units produced, and on the y-axis, we have cost or revenue. We have both of them here because we're comparing cost and revenue. The first element to add is the total cost. So we see the total cost is the fixed cost plus V times N. And we see the two graphs. We have the variable cost, we have the fixed cost, and the full red line is the totality of all the costs. The second element that we have is the revenue. So the revenue is a line through the origin with slope S, and we see this purple line, and we see that there is an intersection between the revenue curve and the total cost. It is clear that the break-even point is the point where costs are equal to the revenues, so we can express this in a formula. The total cost is equal to the revenue, and we can find the break-even point, which is given by the fixed cost divided by the difference between the unit sales price and the unit cost. And we see the orange circle indicated what we call the break-even point. Let's have a look at this in a graph. I wanted to also indicate here that when we look at that break-even point, we see the white line intersecting two zones, the loss and the profit zone. At the left side, below the break-even point, with units identified with the break-even point, we see there is a loss. On the right-hand side, there is a profit. And we can indicate those two elements and those two zones. The triangle to the left of the break-even point is in fact the zone where we have losses, and on the right is the zone where we have the profits. Let's do a calculation, a short example, and we just put some values there. So we have the total cost is 25k plus 250 N, given by the red line. We have the revenue line, which is R is 500 times N, so a unit sells at 500, while the unit cost to produce is 250. This is very important to look at this, that the unit revenue is higher than the unit cost, otherwise we will never have an intersection. We can calculate the break-even point when the total cost is equal to the revenue, and we find in this case that the break-even point equals with 1,000 units. So once we have more than 1,000 units we have to produce, we will have a profit, otherwise we have a loss. So again, at the left-hand side, we have a loss. At the right-hand side, we have a profit. The next part is the make or buy analysis. In the make or buy analysis, we will be comparing the cost between different possibilities. We will buy the product or service, or will we make it? So we have to decide between making a product ourselves or a service or buying it. Can be quite interesting discussion in project management, because when you make a solution, for example, I had a customer who decided to make their own firewall for an application. It means that you have to consider all the cost of ownership, and that may be more expensive than just buying a product off the shelves like AT&T was offering at the time. Due to the large volumes AT&T was working with, they could provide a better service to update the firewall. Now we only compare costs and we select the solution with the lowest cost. We will have a decision point where we decide between making or buying. Now we have the total cost for making a product or service. So we have the total cost index M, and for making, and the total cost to buy, TC index E for buying. We have the two cost formulas, the total cost to make and the total cost to buy. So they have different fixed costs, and of course they also have different variable costs. And as I said before, M, index M, means that we make the product, D means we buy the product. So once we have the total cost for buying larger than the total cost for making, we will in fact make the product because the total cost is lower and we have to select a solution with the lowest cost. When the total buying cost is smaller than the total make cost, we will buy the product or the service. Let us now have a look at the make or buy analysis in a graph. Like before, we have on the x-axis the number of units we are producing, and on the y-axis we only have costs because we're only dealing with costs. The first equation, we have the total cost for manufacturing or making, which is in fact the totality that we pay for making the objects or the services ourselves, and we find the red line. The next item is the total cost for buying, where we see that the slope, the purple line, has a higher slope, and this is typically the way how it should be, because in order to buy something, our investment as fixed cost is lower, and of course the unit price we're going to pay is higher. On the other side, when we make something ourselves, we have a higher fixed cost and we have a lower unit cost because we are getting the profit and not the people who are making the items for us. We can find the break-even point, the decision point. It's not really a break-even point, it's a decision point where we decide between making or buying. And here we see that the decision point or the quantity with the decision point is N is equal to the fixed cost for making minus the fixed cost for buying divided by the difference of the variable costs. And this, of course, is a positive value. When we look at the decision point, we see to the left of the decision point we have the decision to buy it because the costs are lower, and on the right hand side we will make it ourselves because we have sufficient quantity to compensate for the extra fixed cost. Let's have a look at an example for make or buy. So we have the same graph again. In this case we have two solutions. The total cost for making is 25k as a fixed cost plus a production cost of 250 euro or dollar per unit multiplied by the number of units, of course. We have the total cost for buying, which is the purple curve. We see that the fixed cost is only 15k now, but the unit production cost is now double of the previous one. We can calculate the make or buy the decision point. So we find here that N is 25k minus 15k divided by the difference of the variable cost, which gives us a total of 40. So it means that we decide to make or buy at the limit of 40 units. When we need less than 40 units, we will buy the product or the service. When we need more than 40, we will make it. So that was it for our example of different decision-making methods, typically the break-even point and the make or buy decisions. That was it for this video. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next videos. Bye bye.